And what about the Headley override? That was suggested by someone on council as a way to increase city revenues, because currently operations, we pay 6.16 mills, and if there's an override, it could go as high as the original 7.5 mills.
Well, as you can see from, from remembering the chart, that, I mean, Headley's been in place and it hasn't stopped the taxes from going up. It's leveled off now because you had the real estate bubble burst. But, I mean, it could, the commercial market could, the bottom could drop out. But again, I think that the problem is just the spending. And if they have more revenue, I mean, one of the things they need to do is to fix the retirement benefits. And I think they need to raise the retirement age as a piece of that. And you're never going to get a pressure enough to do that unless, I mean, they're beginning to push harder now. You're beginning to see, we're comparing what the university is doing and things like that to make some real cuts. So I think that if the money comes in, those are hard things to do. And one of the problems they have is that the unions don't trust them.
Yes.
And the unions are saying, well, look, you have money for a new city hall, you have $50 million for an underground parking structure, you're talking about, putting $10 million in this Fuller Road parking structure, we're talking about a downtown conference center, which will be a subsidy. We don't believe that you don't have money to pay us. So I mean, I've talked to actually police and firefighters, and I do a lot of mediation in my practice. I work with that, and I said that I thought that what we needed in the city is we have a very good pension attorney, we have a capable actuary, to get them together with the members of the public and the employees and talk about reality, talk about what's sustainable. And their just reaction that came out was, that sounds wonderful, because they don't believe the information that they're getting. So I don't think that we need to trash the unions like seems to be happening nationally.
Yes.
We need to sit down and have an honest discussion. And one of the things I would be willing to consider a tax increase for is part of the problem to solve what we have promised, something that is sustainable.
Right.
But, let's work that out. Let's just not throw more money at it, and then it continues to be business as usual. And in a few years later, they're back saying we need more.
Right. So whether it be Headley or a city tax, it has to go on the ballot. So people would have an opportunity to get themselves informed. And there seems to be a reluctance on the part of citizens, in spite of the structural deficit, to want to go along with increased spending or an increase of revenues from themselves, and it might not get passed. And I was wondering if it could make housing so living in the community so difficult, so expensive, that people might not want to come and live in Ann Arbor, might lose some attraction. Do you think that would be possible?
I think that's certainly a concern. I mean, think about it. We feel, I mean, you see these subsidies that council passes out to get businesses to come. We gave Google, a couple $1 million of free parking to get them to come to Ann Arbor. And so if we feel we have to give subsidies to people to come to Ann Arbor, why do you want to say, okay, now you come to Ann Arbor and you have to pay an income tax on your employees, but if you were outside the city limits, you wouldn't have to pay. I mean, I mean, you can argue whether it's rational or not for businesses to think this way, but I've worked with a lot of them, and they don't want the paperwork, they don't want the extra cost. I think it's going to drive people away. And again, you coming into town to take a job at the university. Well, you can live in South Township and pay 0.5%, or you can live in Ann Arbor and pay 1%.
Right.
And I think that the amount that we're going to get from non-residents, that estimate in the study, is inflated because there are many, many ways to avoid paying tax. You're a university professor that lives in South Township. You come into the university for 2 days a week to teach classes. You're only going to pay tax on the 2 days out of the 5 days.
Right.
And again, your higher income people are going to have more ability to do that.
And we also don't have a real fix on the number of that come in.
Yes.
Yes.
That number was very squishy.
Yes. So there is another topic that keeps coming up and I think puzzles people, and that is buckets. We use the term to mean that something must stay put, wherever it comes from, it has to stay in that fund. But council on Monday night, the Monday night work session, that seemed to exemplify what I'm calling the bucket shuffle. It seems like a new dance. And so to decrease spending from the general fund, they just move things to a different fund. I mean, forestry now goes to stormwater, and so it went. So maybe you can explain how there's a claim for buckets, and yet money seems to move all around.
Well, certainly, if the city administrator wants to get money from one bucket to the other, they can do it. And let me give you, I thought we'd play a little bucket poker. And so here we've got the general fund and an economic development fund. And we just take some chips from the general fund and we put them in the economic development fund. And then we try to pretend that somehow that's a separate fund and it has to be used for economic development. But there's no legal reason why it can't go back the other way if you're short. The other area that they use is the insurance fund. And a few years ago, council changed the rules on the insurance fund to make the uses of it broader. Well, in the insurance fund, you have payments by a lot of other funds. So you have the water fund, and that's rich. And let's just make this the utilities funds. So the utilities funds and all the other funds pay into the insurance fund. So, you have lots of funds paying. This has lots of money. You then decide, and the way this insurance fund is supposed to work, it's supposed to be break even. It's only supposed to charge the other funds for the actual cost. But you'll get several million built up in there, and then you decide, oh, well, we're going to give it to somebody else. So you've taken money out of this to cut down the trees when we had the emerald ash borer. You have, I think about over $3 million has gone into the police courts building, directly. But and the other thing they do is from the water fund, when you say this is funded by fees, and the fees are supposed to be only used to provide water. But somehow we can take $800,000 from this fund every year and put it in the general fund for police services. Now, if that's not violating the bucket rule, I don't know what is. But one of the...
So do they say that the police are protecting the water?
Well, yes, the gated water treatment plant, yes.
Okay, so that's what, okay.
But you can come up with some explanation. But they did one transaction a while ago where they started with the insurance fund, and they put $2 million from the insurance fund into the general fund to for better use of fund balance or some flaky reason. Then you took $2 million from the general fund and you put it over here in the fleet fund, and you had a maintenance center fund. And you changed the name of that to Municipal Facilities Fund. Yeah. And then you took the $2 million from the new. So you put from the, let's see.
From the fleet into the municipal?
From the fleet, from the municipal, now renamed Municipal Facilities Fund, and you wanted to get it to the municipal center. And there was already $5 million in here. So this brought it to $7 million. And then you took, so you took this whole $7 million and you put it in the municipal center fund, and then you took $7 million from the water fund and replaced it because you needed to finish the building. So at the end of the day, the water fund, the water and sewer funds had $7 million less. The municipal facilities had more. But I mean, you'll see, and Steve Councilman actually was questioning them about this, and I remember Roger Frazier having to jump in and bail the CFO out because he was backing himself into acknowledging that you had done something illegal.
Oh, okay. Well, I thank you. I just, we hear so much about buckets that, and, can't move it, and now we see that they actually do
find
move
ways.
it.
It's the motive. If the motivation is there, they'll
Right.
find a way.
So, oh my goodness, we're really running low on time. We must get to the retirement benefits. There it was a blue ribbon committee, that the mayor's blue ribbon committee, that was called in 2004 because of the concern about the process and funding of retirement benefits. And then in 2005, this committee gave a report of its recommendations and observations to council. And can we quickly just tick off some of those because we're so short on time?
Okay. One of the recommendations they wanted is to change the board composition because it was controlled by employees. And so they felt it wasn't independent. So they wanted to add 3 citizen members and remove the city administrator from the board. That was never done. That would have to go to the voters.
I think that it is the importance of this process, you know, that this idea of independence of the board. I think that is, and specifically, they did ask for the city administrator to be removed because, and the quote is, the trustee whose influence may be perceived as directive. I'm wondering now that the city administrator has given his resignation, if this is an opportunity for a change in the retirement and in the healthcare boards.
The opportunity was always there. In fact, you had a plan trustee resign because of failure to create this independent board.
Right, and he really, I think that's very interesting. He resigned 3 years later, in 8, and he said because of a lack of urgency and absence of changes. Yes, and he also then mentioned the removal specifically of the city administrator as a trustee. So I just, I didn't want us not to get to this because the council has not acted on this at all.
I mean, the only thing they've done, and this has been there all along, is they try to reduce their health care costs by having different programs, and they're now making employees pay a modest part of it.
Right.
But that's about the only thing that's been done.
Right.
They haven't addressed
So
any of the big issues.
this would require, and the person who resigned, sent this letter of resignation, which you can go online to see, wrote in bold at the end, he urged a charter change amendment to create a majority of independent trustees on the pension and VEBA boards. There are 2 separate boards.
But it's the same membership.
The same membership, but they're 2 separate boards. And the funding, where does the funding come from? Pension has a millage.
Yeah, but the pension, I think the millage is $9 million, and that the pension is up to that.
And the health care comes from the funding for the health care?
The funding for the health care came from the pension plan when, way back when, it had more money than the actuary said it's needed. But the city has only put in $4 million out of general fund. We're not funding it.
Right, so we are delinquent in it, and we are delinquent in time. I don't know if there's any 1/2 second message that you want to say to people.
I would say on the priorities, I looked at the general fund and the group of departments called general government, which is the administrator, the attorney, that kind of stuff. That went up 17%. Parks declined 13%. That's where the priorities are when you look at real numbers.
On that message, I want to thank you very much, Karen Sidney, for being with us. And I want to thank you, our viewers, for watching. Our email is otherperspectives82.com. Write to us. We want to hear your thoughts, your concerns, what you like, what is bothering you. And you know, we always welcome other perspectives. See you next time.